You're listening to The Conversation Weekly from The Conversation.
Oh boy, this is fascinating. I hang out on a lot of internet spaces and it's hard to turn off the sociology a lot of the time. So when I find something truly strange, bizarre, and unusual, I get really captivated by that.
This is Aarushi Bhandari. She's a sociologist at Davidson College in the US.
I'm an avid Reddit user. It's my kryptonite. I can't stop. One day, Reddit showed this subreddit talking about how to acquire a Birkin bag because to the layperson, it's like, okay, it sounds like it's an expensive thing, and if you have money, you should be able to buy it, right?
The Birkin bag, made and sold exclusively by French luxury retailer Hermès, a Birkin can cost tens of thousands of US dollars. But even an extremely wealthy person can't just walk into an Hermès store and purchase a Birkin, or another of their models called a Kelly.
Essentially, in order to get a Birkin or a Kelly, you need to have a record of spending tens of thousands of dollars even before you're offered to buy one. But spending that money doesn't automatically mean you get a bag. You have to develop a relationship with a sales associate at a particular Hermès store, and the sales associate really gets to decide if there's availability, whether or not you get offered a bag.
This subreddit Aarushi had stumbled on was full of people talking about how to get their hands on one of these bags.
So if you go on this community, you can see these really fascinating stories of people that don't, to me, feel particularly real or regular in any way. The kind of things they're worried about is like, oh, how can I impress my sales associate? So the sales associate sort of becomes this powerful figure that holds their lives in their hands.
Hermès doesn't reveal how it selects who gets a bag and why. And this exclusivity drives a preoccupation with these bags among the global elite.
The mystique of it is that there isn't really the right amount of money you can spend or right amount of relationship you can build that will guarantee getting offered a chance to buy this obscenely expensive item.
This is a story of how one product has become a status symbol for the global elite. But it's also a story about what happened when one US retailer, Walmart, recently launched a bag that looked very similar to the Birkin for a lot less money, sparking discussions about wealth disparity and the ethics of conspicuous consumption. I'm Gemma Ware, and this is The Conversation Weekly, The World Explained by Experts. Joining me for this episode is Nick Lair, the arts and culture editor at The Conversation in the US. Hi, Nick.
Hey, Gemma.
So, Nick, tell me, do you hang out on Reddit?
I do. I follow a bunch of different subreddits. Some that I follow are tied to my own life and interests. So there's a subreddit for Providence, Rhode Island, where I live. A subreddit for the Red Sox, my favorite baseball team.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever come across this particular subreddit that we're talking about today, the one about the Birkin bags?
No, I had not.
So my producer Katie has sent me a couple of these links to this subreddit. Should we just have a look through some of these examples? So I'm going to just open this first one. My cat chewed my first Hermès bag. Oh, dear.
Because the bags can be like hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's not a great thing to have happen to your investment.
Yeah. Also on this subreddit, you've got lots of people telling their stories of how they got their bags, right? Which is a whole game in itself, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's amazing the hoops people go through. I've actually heard through a friend of mine about somebody who was looking for an Hermès bag. She made friends with a sales associate and got her phone number. And one evening, the sales associate told her that she might have a bag that could interest this woman. So the woman decided to drive through the night from one European country to another just in the hope of buying this bag. I mean, I was astonished when I heard that. And there are other stories like this on the subreddit, aren't there?
Yeah, every bag has an origin story.
Tell us about this origin story of the original Birkin bag.
Yeah, so the story starts in 1983. On a flight from Paris to London. Jane Birkin, who's an English actress and singer, was seated next to Jean-Louis Dumas, the CEO of Hermès. She had a bag with her, which ended up spilling all over the cabin floor. As she scrambled to gather her things, she told Dumas how hard it was to find a leather bag that was both elegant and practical. and that sparked an idea. Soon after, Dumas designed a handbag just for her, and it would later be known as the Birkin. It debuted in 1984 and pretty quickly became the ultimate symbol of luxury. You know, it's handcrafted in France. Each one can take up to 48 hours to make. The leathers are top tier. And Hermès doesn't mass produce them. So that scarcity has created a huge demand. There are waiting lists that can last for months, for years. Celebrities love them. Fashion collectors try to get one. And on the resale market, rare Birkins can go for hundreds of thousands of dollars.
The fact that the company doesn't even really want you to be able to get your hands on one, it's such a fascinating marketing strategy.
Yes, the whole manufactured scarcity thing. Because they're so tied to status, that's what you're really purchasing. And because they're so rare, through a choice made by the company.
Yeah, and it's the thrill of the effort to get one, the thrill of the hunt, the chase, isn't it? Great. Well, thanks, Nick. It's been fun.
Happy to be here.
As entertaining as it is to think about having tens of thousands of dollars to drop on a bag, Nick and I are definitely outsiders to that world. So I wanted to talk to someone who has spent time on the inside, sociologist Parul Bhandari. No relation to Aarushi, Parul is the Director of Studies for Human, Social and Political Sciences at St Edmund's College at the University of Cambridge in the UK.
I research gender and class inequalities in contemporary South Asia, and I started researching elites in 2016.
As part of her PhD, Parul spent months observing women in the top 1% of wealthy Indian families in Delhi. Cheeky question, is this a society that you are from? Or if not, how did you get yourself kind of embedded into it?
No, not a cheeky question at all. A very important methodological question. No, I'm not a part of the super rich, but I did occupy spaces of the super rich by virtue of attending the same high school as some of them. I went to a Catholic all-girls school, which was also a preference for several of the rich families. So I ended up in their world by that virtue. Equally also of extended family. So I would class myself as, I would say, upper middle class, but not the super rich. But I had extended family who were married into some super rich families. Okay. So then there was that connection as well.
Parul spent time with women from some of these connected families. She eventually established a rapport, and a few agreed to be interviewed for her research.
I said, I just want to understand your lives. And that could be anything and everything. I mean, most of us do work with biases, which is that they're super rich women, they're just going to spend money. Who really wants to understand their lives? What kind of vulnerability could they possibly have? They're so privileged. So I was coming from that space as well, which is to understand what does it mean for them to do emotional labor and to keep a family together. So that was my motivation. And so when I entered that space, I genuinely didn't have very precise questions, but it was more like, okay, how are you living your life? So what is your relationship with money? Which is obviously very different than, say, housewives of middle classes or working classes, right? Which is about saving and then procuring and cooking. But what about you? What happens to the relationship with money when there is abundance of money? Right? What about privileges then? What about vulnerabilities then? What about anxieties then?
And one of the things that you hit upon and you began to really be fascinated by is the Hermès Birkin bag, which has become this global elite status symbol. What does this Birkin bag represent to these women that you were talking to then?
So I can answer this in two ways. One is straight up the material aspect of it, which is that the desire to be seen as a member of a global elite. So a bag that is carried by rich women of New York, of London, of Paris, is something that you desire as well, so that it's sort of a ticket of entry into the global elite. So there's that one material answer. Equally, there's another aspect. Expressing love is an important part in the life of most women, I'm guessing, but definitely elite women. Birkin comes to represent also the love and affection that their husband has for them. Not only from the point of view of money, because obviously this bag is extremely expensive, but also because it is difficult to procure. So what are the strategies that you undertake to get this bag? How does your husband help in getting you that bag then becomes a testimony to that conjugal love that you have. And I say this because in a few settings, women discussed how they really, really wanted this bag and it wasn't available in India and there was a long waiting list in the US or wherever, but then they spoke to their husband and then the husband sort of pulls out his contacts and tries and gets them, procures them. So the very act of procuring the bag, which is not easy, is used as a narrative by the women to sort of say that, look, my husband loves me so much. So in that sense, I would say, of course, it symbolizes conspicuous consumption, wanting to be a part of global elite, but also something about love.
I love that. That's it's just like, oh, my husband loves me so much that he's traveled the world and tried to get contacts at these shops.
Yeah.
So you say it's very difficult to get your hands on one of these bags. What lengths did some of the women that you spent time with go to get their hands on a Birkin?
Well, one particular case, I talk about this in my book as well, wherein this woman requested a husband who got in touch with some business partner in Germany, because in Germany, apparently the list was shorter than in, say, Paris or New York. And then he requested that person to be on the list and then try and get it from there. So there was this whole, process, which was Indo-German process, husband using his professional links to get his hands on this bag. And that was the talk of the social circles then, that it wasn't simply going to another city and buying it, but it was actually using your networks to get on a list in a city which would not have a very high waiting list.
So I guess it involves quite a lot of travel. You might have to go to a few different stores, spend your money in different Hermès stores as well. So there's a lot of being part of that global elite that goes into it, an investment in even just getting the bag.
Exactly. And also signaling your familiarity with the shopping landscapes of different countries. So that's important, right? There's so many things that you could buy in India. But when you say, I bought this from London, or I bought this from Paris, or I bought this from New York, not only are you saying you have the money to be able to travel to these places, you're also signaling a familiarity with these places, saying that I actually go there often, that I buy things from there often. So there's that added element of signaling conspicuous consumption, not just of the bag, but of the consumer culture in general of different cities.
Forgive me, this is a really stupid question.
No, go for it.
Hermès bags are mainly made of leather, right?
Yeah.
Is that not an issue?
That was can I just say, John, such a good question. So given the Hindu majority identity of Indians, and the fact that, of course, cow is seen as sacred. So I wouldn't say all, but there'll be several practicing Hindus who might not eat beef. So products that are made of leather, it's very interesting, right? Where they position themselves, because mostly these products are made of calf leather. And it might not seem immediately intelligible for Indians, practicing Hindus, to be buying products made of leather. But I feel that somewhere when it comes to bags, there's just a lot of leeway and relaxation because several of these super rich housewives at least say that they are very religious, perform a religiosity, perform a piety, and which is performed through celebration of festivals and observing fasts and things like that. So religion is an important part in their performance of them being a good elite housewife. Equally, when it comes to bags, I don't think they care that much because the Hermès Birkin is made of, well, not just calf leather, but as we said, crocodile leather. Depending on the exotic nature of the leather, the price also goes up. So you're more concerned in signaling which is the level of the Birkin that you have purchased as well. The color as well as the leather, and higher it is obviously means you have better taste and of course the money.
Okay.
To buy that.
Gives you an extra incentive to want a crocodile one.
Yeah, it might not sit very well with a performance of religious piety, but then there you go. Life is all about contradictions, isn't it? And I suppose when it comes to bags, contradictions is all that it is.
Yeah.
Every week, Michelle Grattan offers you a ringside seat to the latest in Australian politics with interviews and insights from political insiders. On the Conversations Politics with Michelle Grattan podcast, we cut through the spin and get to the substance with independent analysis of the issues that really matter. Stay informed, search and follow Politics with Michelle Grattan wherever you get your podcasts.
In late 2024, Walmart, the US retailer worth approximately $690 billion, began marketing a bag that was quickly dubbed the Wirkin bag. These Walmart bags looked a lot like an Hermès Birkin, but at a fraction of the price, a mere $78, and they sold out fast. All this fascinated Aarushi Bhandari, the sociologist we heard at the start of this episode.
I started seeing these TikToks that were like, I'm going to do this really counter-cultural act and buy a bag. At first, it was fashion accounts being like, oh, we can too have this iconic Hermès design.
And you mean to tell me they're all up in arms because the normal everyday woman can actually afford a good purse now and look like we got something that we spent probably 30 grand on? To the rich and famous, don't be upset that we're carrying a $50 bag, honey. You still got a daggone $60,000 purse on your arm. It's okay. We ain't trying to compete. We just trying to be like everybody else and have a daggone good purse.
Slowly, it started being this very intentionally aggravating movement towards the elites.
Let's talk about the Walmart Birkin. I'm actually really excited about this because I think that it signals a shift in our society. I think it's hilarious that these Hermès bags are accessible now. Hermès was always a shortcut to taste and a signifier of wealth. And now wealthy people are kind of have to work for it. You can't just get an Hermès bag and let that explain everything for you. I hope people give up on the pursuit of Hermès and they do something better with their time and with their money.
People were making these TikToks that were very much like, why should elites have the ability to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a bag when I can't even afford food sometimes, or groceries are so expensive and this or that?
Why do I think owning a Birkin is embarrassing? Because there are people starving, homeless, children who are going without Christmases, people who lose their heat in the middle of winter. I can't imagine being so greedy that a Birkin was my goal.
Beyond venting their frustration with this wealth disparity, Aarushi noticed that some of the people posting on TikTok seemed to want to humiliate those who could afford the bag.
There was a TikTok that was like, imagine Kim Kardashian at an event feeling like, oh, maybe somebody's going to think my bag is a Wirkin. And that's the emotion they're really trying to invoke, is like make the people who actually buy these obscenely priced purses feel insecure in their sense of elitism.
Aarushi sees this reaction to the Wirkin bag as a form of anti-elitism. But it's something different, she thinks, to other recent mass mobilizations against economic inequality.
If you go all the way back to 2010 and you think about the Occupy Wall Street movements or the Arab Spring revolutions, those were the early sort of cyber utopian days of the internet where people would rally around a cause, and that would be the mood online, right? But really from 2012 onwards, the culture has been very much arguing over things like identity politics. There was a very loud, the alt-right and the woke left, and that was the dominant culture online for a while. And there's been a ton of research on this, right? That online culture increasingly after that brief moment in the Occupy era turned into this chasm. And to me, at the end of the year last year, that started to shift. Not to say there isn't a lot of chasm still, right? But it seems that people are tired of having the same debates over and over again, and they've sort of found a new enemy. And the new enemy is not the average online user. It's not each other. It's this third entity that seems to be exploiting all of them in some capacity. And that is fresh for our current fragmented Web 2.0 internet era. I am going to say this from a US-centric perspective because that's where I've lived for the last decade and a half of my life. But even going back to Occupy Wall Street, I think there's been a very broad awakening of class differences, class issues, and elite inequality. Then the Occupy movement transitioned into the Bernie Sanders 2016 and 2020 movement in the US again, right? And the mobilization was massive.
Bernie Sanders, a progressive American senator, attempted to become the Democratic Party nominee for president in both 2016 and 2020. but in both cases lost to more centrist Democratic opponents, Hillary Clinton and then Joe Biden. Since then, US politics has shifted dramatically to the right with Donald Trump's re-election. And yet, Aarushi notes that this Wirkin bag moment was taking place just as Trump was coming back into office. To her, this suggests that, at least in some parts of the internet, a cultural rejection of elites isn't always a consciously political act.
This is, to me, the most interesting thing about this phenomena is that people are reacting from this very innate sense of dissatisfaction or discontent, but there's not a political motivation to it, right? So people are saying basically they hate elites by buying bags from Walmart. Walmart is a massive corporation. So if you really start to think about it, people aren't really taking an ideological position. They are making profits for Walmart, right? There's not a lot of thought in it. And I think it's just showing something that's deeper than conscious politicking. It's the sense of, okay, if we keep creating a system where there is massive inequality and accumulation of capital amongst a small number of people, and the majority are just left feeling unable to meet their basic needs, that the pressure cooker is going to explode, right? That people are going to express that in some way, whether or not they do it consciously. That's what's different about this moment. Occupy Wall Street was a conscious political moment. This sort of anti-elitism is populist, it's innate, it's just happening.
Interesting. So I guess since then we've had Elon Musk take power adjacent to Trump. So we have an incredibly elite, the richest man in the world now in the center of power in the US. Are you seeing this anti-elitism continue in online spaces or change in any way?
Yes. Absolutely. People are really upset. I mean, on the internet, you can see people across the political spectrum just being stunned by his actions. And the kind of things that are happening in the US, you would think only affect a small number of people, like large firings in the federal government. But it's not just that, right? All of these cuts are affecting sectors of the American middle class that people hadn't really perceived were tied to federal funding before. So in my demographic, which is just overly educated millennials, everyone is affected. So there's a lot of rhetoric around look at what elites are doing. They're destroying everything, right? That's the discourse. It's we're all affected and we're all going to somehow be negatively impacted by this.
Yeah. I mean, it's very difficult to predict what's going to go viral, but you perhaps think that this anti-elite moment and these things like the Wirkin, which people can kind of hang on to in some way to kind of make that point, they will continue throughout this year to make waves.
I think absolutely. And this is, again, goes back to sort of what I study. It's really all of these individual cultural actions that now are most visible through how the internet speaks to each other, right, are not happening in a vacuum. They're happening in a context of political economy that is unfolding at the local, national, and global levels. And so right now, the real political economic context, again, in the US context at least, is one of rapid deceleration and descent. And I feel fairly confident that this is going to continue to reflect in online culture as rapidly accelerating anti-elitism. Now, I can't speak to the world, but I think at least in the US that the writing is on the wall in that way.
Well, thank you so much, Aarushi. It's been fascinating getting your take on this. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
In February, the CEO of Hermès, Axel Dumas, admitted that he was irritated by the Walmart bag and that the company took counterfeiting very seriously. The conversation approached Hermès for a comment on the Walmart bag and to confirm how it decides who is eligible to buy a Birkin. Hermès did not respond. Walmart stopped selling its bag in January, and it has since entered into a partnership with a second-hand luxury resale platform called Rebags, which means customers can buy real Birkins second-hand through Walmart's online marketplace. That's it for this week's episode. It was written and produced by Katie Flood with mixing and sound design by Eloise Stevens. Our theme music is by Nita Saul. Stephen Kahn is our global executive editor, and I'm Gemma Ware, the host and executive producer. If you'd like to get in touch, do email us directly at podcast@theconversation.com. You can sign up for The Conversation's free daily newsletter too by clicking on the link in our show notes. The Conversation is a non-profit news outlet dedicated to sharing the work of academic experts to help you make better decisions. If you like what we do, please support us at donate.theconversation.com. And please rate and review the podcast wherever you follow us. It really helps people find us. Thanks so much for listening.